Hey fellow ishies, welcome back to the channel. So today I have episode 3 of the Death of a Powerhouse. And if you don't know what that is, please go back and watch episodes 1 and 2. The premise is that I am taking a current news event and using some old dead words from 16th, 17th, 18th century and putting them in a current news event. I've also done videos on the meanings of these old words and where they come from. So if you don't understand what I'm doing, you can go back and look at those videos. Most of them are pretty short. So this episode is probably the shortest episode. It's only, it's barely 2 pages. So just as a reminder, I'm not like changing costumes or anything for any of these characters, but this is the character, Jake Fife, because he has the intelligence of a decorative pumpkin. That will come out later in a later episode. And this is smooth talking Griff King. Just trying to have a little bit of fun with this. All right, let's get started. Episode 3 of Death of a Powerhouse. By the 3rd week after Charlene's murder, the country had divided itself into 2 exhausting camps. People who still had questions, and people who became strangely angry that questions still existed. Now, disagreement itself doesn't bother me. Healthy disagreement is banging. Necessary even. But what unsettled me was how quickly ordinary skepticism started being treated like moral failure. Broadcasters who asked for evidence became dangerous. Lawyers requesting disclosure became reckless. Military analysts pointing out ballistic inconsistencies were suddenly called conspiracy theorists by men who couldn't identify a rifle if you handed them one backwards. And that was when I began to notice a very particular kind of person appearing everywhere around this case. The Sayolist. People with just enough information to sound authoritative and just little enough understanding to become genuinely dangerous. Jake Fife had naturally become their patron saint. Jake spent nearly an entire broadcast red-faced and sputtering about internet blatteroons undermining democracy, despite the unfortunate reality that he himself couldn't explain basic details of the prosecution's timeline without wandering into complete ambiguity. At one point he shouted, "The evidence exists! The public just doesn't need to see every detail." Which is a fascinating argument in a murder case. That's a bit like a restaurant insisting the kitchen is perfectly clean while refusing to let anyone look behind the door where the fogo is pouring out. Griff King, meanwhile, remained as polished as ever. Too polished. The sort of polish that begins feeling honeyfuggled after a while. Griff had become the calm face of institutional reassurance. Every appearance included the same elegant tortiloquy about trusting the process, protecting stability, and preventing dangerous speculation. And people loved it because certainty is comforting, even fake certainty, especially fake certainty. The trouble was, the deeper I dug, the stranger Griff's orbit became. Not direct connections, never direct. That's not how powerful people operate. Instead, it was layers. Foundations connected to investors. Investors connected to lobbying firms. Lobbying firms connected to Belcrane Energy Initiatives. Fictional place name. Former intelligence consultants appearing at media conferences sponsored by organizations Griff somehow always seemed adjacent to. Adjacent. That word started haunting me because eventually enough adjacency stops looking accidental. One night, Vera Holt called me after reviewing another sealed court filing and said, "Owen, I have honestly seen more transparency in organized criminal prosecutions." I asked her quietly, "Can they honestly convict Robbie Tyson with what they've shown?" Long silence. Then only a complete option blooper would believe evidence nobody's allowed to examine. Now that felt real, because the prosecution seemed to be fudgling its way through the case. Every time somebody tugged at one loose thread, 3 more appeared. Witness statements shifted, timelines wandered, evidence remained locked away like crown jewels. And the judge, God bless him, had developed the personality of a frightened sting bum guarding buried treasure. At one hearing, a reporter asked whether ballistic reports would finally be released publicly. The judge adjusted his glasses, gave a little frunce, and said, "Certain materials are not appropriate for public dissemination." Not appropriate. There's that phrase again. The language powerful people use when they've decided the public exists to be managed rather than informed. And meanwhile, Charlene herself kept bothering me, because the more people I spoke with, the clearer it became that Charlene had changed during her final months. She'd begun distancing herself from certain investors and foreign partnerships. She'd reportedly argued with executives over Velcrane contracts involving mineral extraction overseas. One former employee described the final months at Veritas Meridian as walking through betweenity, where nobody quite understood what was happening, but everybody sensed something ugly was approaching. And perhaps most disturbing of all, several younger broadcasters suddenly began receiving enormous sponsorship deals after aggressively defending Velcrane policies online. Overnight successes. Dewdroppers transformed into celebrities. Scamblers in expensive suits lecturing the public about morality. And every road somehow kept circling back toward the same cluster of people orbiting Grift King. Allegedly. Always allegedly. Because one thing I had learned very quickly was that powerful people rarely leave fingerprints, but they do leave patterns. All right, so that is the end of episode 3. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Got any ideas? Who do you think did it? I still haven't decided how I'm going to end it yet. Next up is episode 4, and that's called The Orbit, as in the orbit around Grift King. That's all I have. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see the rest of these episodes, and I'll see you next time.